tier list time. I suppose, we need to set a few ground rules here, don't we? We need a few ground rules. How are we going to qualify professions? Are we going to qualify them on whether I think they're more fun or not, or whether they're for the purpose of making more gold? You got to pick one of the two. I guess most people are going to care more than anything else about which of the professions is going to make them more gold, right? That makes a profitable. See, you ask a bunch of goblins what they want, and it's clear that they want more gold. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we'll categorize these based then on how much gold I suspect you'll be able to make from them. Fun is subjective, gold is not. Very true. Very true. So, I guess then, should we just work our way down the list? Should we start at the top and work our way down? Alchemy. Alchemy is a good one to start with, you know, because alchemy is a bit interesting. These are the old icons as well, actually. I should probably update to the new icons. Alchemy is a fun one because it's going to be region-wide. Everything, absolutely everything that you're going to be crafting and selling for the purpose of alchemy is potentially going on the region-wide auction house. So this gives it the ability to quite easily be A tier for some. It could be S tier for some, because you've got ridiculous potential with this. The potential is super duper mega high. The problem is that not that many people are going to qualify for that level of gold, right? The people that are going to make the silly gold off alchemy are going to be the ones that are first to market with the best tier quality of stuff. So the hardcore alchemists out there have a good chance to make a lot of gold. I think on that premise it puts it A. Alchemy is going to be really good. There's never an expansion ever in the history of ever where alchemy in the first patch of an expansion hasn't printed people millions of gold. If we look ever so quickly in game, now I don't want to use in-game footage for this too much, but looking at, oh my god, the UI is still hella busted. If we look at what we're making as an alchemist, we are super duper heavy focused on potions, cauldrons, and vials instead of flasks this time round. There is a couple of trinkets. There's the alchemy stone trinkets, but these are, you know, under normal circumstances, they're alright. But they're never anything super special. They're probably not going to have too much life to them. They tend to get replaced very quickly. Alchemy also has a couple of the finishing reagents. Finishing reagents are a new thing for Dragonflight. Finishing reagents are something that the serious crafters are going to look at using because they do offer some shiny bonuses. So there might be a steady demand for an alchemist to be crafting and selling these. Increases the bonus skill from inspiration by 15%. Increases inspiration by 30 and multi-craft by 27. These finishing reagents are going to be, I'm not going to say super duper mega profitable, but they will for sure be in demand because everybody is going to be looking at using some of these, especially if they're trying to min-max their professions in the first place, which I think for the very first one, and of course it's backed up with transmutes like it always is. I think alchemy's got to be A tier, right? Alchemy's got to be A tier. It's got a relatively interesting path to success because you learn everything in alchemy through the discovery system, which is some people will love, some people will hate. It depends on if you get lucky or not. The discovery system is not, it's a discovery system. You know, you press a button and randomly it will pull a recipe out for you. If you get lucky and you get a really good potion really quickly that you can start working on and crafting and improving the quality of, you win big. But realistically, across the board, I think alchemy's got to be A. Alchemy's got to be A, I reckon. Look what's next. I don't think we need to talk too much about archaeology, do we? Really, considering it doesn't exist. It's on my list because technically it's still a profession, but it's not really, is it? It's not really. Okay. We might need a swamp past here. Dead profession. Yeah, maybe. D for dead. D for dead profession. I think that makes a lot of sense. Blacksmithing. who's had access to the beta to have a little bit of a look at blacksmithing? I'm considering blacksmithing to be reasonable, but it's not S tier. I think blacksmithing is going to be very, very good for one of a couple of reasons. In a gold rush, you should probably be selling shovels. And that's exactly what blacksmith does. Blacksmith holds the recipes to a lot of profession tools. A lot of profession tools. So for every single crafter out there that wants to be, you know, a serious crafter and wants to make a lot of gold, one of the very first things they're going to look at doing is getting as good of a profession tool as they possibly can. You can only have one profession tool and you can have 2 profession accessories. Everybody is going to want a good profession tool. You can have a huge amount of stats and skill points on these things. Blacksmiths make most of them. Now, they're locked behind reputations, but this is not a tier list based on the difficulty of the profession. This is just a tier list on the potential profit that can be made. And I think blacksmithing, dare I say, it's S tier. In my opinion, blacksmithing is going to be monstrous. Because not only is it selling all of the tools that everybody needs to make for all of the other crafters to do their job, properly, it's also backed up by the fact that it still supplies every plate wearer with all of their gear, and there's some good gear in that as well. And weapons. Let's not forget, this time round, blacksmiths actually make weapons. Yes, blacksmiths making weapons is going to be key. Everybody wants the biggest and best weapon they can possibly get their hands on, and it's in many cases the biggest significant factor in increasing your DPS. And people do love big numbers, and if they can get their hands on a crafted weapon, and more importantly, if they can choose to craft themselves a mythic quality weapon, I think people are going to want to do it. So, yeah, I tend to think that those 3 things combined is really going to push blacksmithing far ahead. Now, there's the obvious thing that at the beginning, you're going to have to specialize in one direction or the other. But the reality is, whichever direction you spec into, if you spec into crafting weapons, if you spec into crafting armor, or you go the route of specking into and selling everybody tools, you've got good choice, and every choice is a good choice. It's going to be very, very hard to go wrong, I think, with blacksmithing, personally. I'd be interested, obviously, to hear your people's opinions on this. BFA was OP for blacksmithing because of weapons. Like I said, everybody given the choice would love to have a shiny new higher item level, more damage dealing, more healing, more, a bigger and better weapon is better all the time, right? And that's where blacksmiths are going to come in key. Next on our list then, we have cooking. I'm in 2 minds about cooking, because you could argue cooking is in a similar position to alchemy in terms of the fact it provides you food buffs. But it's still a secondary profession. There's no spec trees. There's not really too much room for... In a world where everything has progressed, we've got quality options on everything. Let me put it this way. Under normal circumstances, I think cooking would be a B. But I think it gets dropped down to a C for me simply because everything else has moved on and cooking really hasn't. Cooking, there's no quality with any of the cooking materials or the crafts. You're not worried too much about it's just not gone forward the same as everything else has gone forward. In its own right, it probably stands on its own 2 feet quite nicely. Cooking in Dragonflight is going to be better than cooking in Shadowlands. But it's still not going to be super lucrative, I don't think. Everybody has access to it. Most of the stuff is going on the region-wide auction house. There's not much room there for actual profit. Now, of course, not everybody wants to be cooking all of their own food, and there is still a big demand for it. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't think they've done enough with cooking in Dragonflight to really, you know, push it forward. Yeah, it's a C. Yeah. It's C. It's not going to be very good, I don't think. I don't think it's going to be very good. We'll move on quickly because it's only a secondary profession. Enchanting. Who's had a chance to look at enchanting? I know I've not focused on enchanting too much, but enchanting does have a couple of interesting spec paths you can push into it. Enchanting at face value is really boring, but this isn't necessarily a list of what's going to be boring and what's not going to be boring. This is a list of how much gold you'll be able to make. I mostly check disenchanting. See, this is a thing, right? There's a lot more disenchanting options. I think the passive gold that you'll be able to make with enchanting is quite good. But I don't think it's going to put it in the same league as these two. Enchanting is E? No, I don't think it's not going to be fun and interesting, but there's definitely the option for making a lot of gold. People enchant their stuff heavily in the first patch of an expansion. There's lots of gold to be had, but I just don't think it's going to be as much as these. I think we've got our first candidate for B, you know. A is for alchemy, C is for cooking, D is for dead, enchanting is E. Oh, I see. I did misread that. I think we've got our first candidate for a B tier profession, you know. There's no and I think this is mainly because you've got quality to contend with for the herbs, right? For alchemy, but there's no quality on the materials for enchanting, meaning that most people's crafting costs are going to be very, very, very similar, which will shave the margin potential off that. I don't think you're going to have as much fun trying to make gold with enchanting. There's a slight problem that crystals might be rarest, you know, rarest rocking horse doo-doo. Simply because there's no epics to disenchant at the beginning of the expansion. But there are ways you can alleviate that if you spec correctly. I still don't think it pushes it up though, even with these sorts of things. I think I'm going to put enchanting as a B tier profession, which is actually interesting. We've got ourselves quite a clever spread of choices here already. Yeah, I think if enchanting was more lucrative, I think if it had more to offer other than just enchants, which unfortunately it really doesn't. It doesn't do anything else apart from what it says on the tin, really. It will be a good second profession to have alongside something that's your main focus, I reckon. That's my thoughts on enchanting anyway. Let's move on. Engineering. Oh boy, engineering. Engineering's a difficult one for the fact that there's a fair few things that I reckon that people are going to want from engineering, but it's still very heavily focused in its utility. Still very heavily going to be, you know, it makes bombs and it's PvP orientated, and it's from a gold making perspective, which is where we got to focus this on. From actually purely making gold, I don't think you're going to make a lot of gold with engineering. It will be good if you know that it does the things you want it to do. And that is, let's be honest, that is kind of the point of engineering. But I can't see engineering being anything more than C, realistically. It's higher than cooking, though. It's higher than cooking. Well, let's look at it based on this, though. It's higher than cooking. It's definitely higher than cooking. But I don't think it's better than enchanting. And I can't, in good faith, put engineering in the same tier as enchanting. Even if I think enchanting is boring, its potential to make gold is good. It's got to go C. It's got to go high C. It's going to be... These top spots are going to be competitive because there's lots of good ones coming. So I don't think it's fair to put it any higher than that, unfortunately. There's not too much that engineering has. Oh, I need to sanity check this. While I'm thinking about it, let me log on to my engineer and sanity check this, because there is S I've even S tier gold is the name of my character for engineering. Let me just double check this, because I can't think of any reason for it to go above. I can't think of why I'd push it into B tier. But I don't want to do it the injustice of not being thorough. Let's ever so quickly check everything. Parts, you're not going to make a huge amount of gold from parts. It doesn't make a mount. Now, you see, if it made a mount, if engineers made a mount, it'd be a different story, but they don't. They have the battle res. They have utility. This is the thing. They have utility, but utility doesn't necessarily mean lots of gold. Goggles are a thing, but goggles are a thing. You have to be an engineer to use the goggles in the first place, which is always puts them one step behind other things, just purely the fact that you have to be an engineer to use them. Which means that if you are an engineer, then you could in theory craft them and make them yourselves, which means you're not going to be selling them to make any gold from, which is, you know, what we're looking at here. It makes a couple of guns like it usually does. Great for hunters, but there's also a bow that is going to compete with this. Yeah, I can't see there being so much. Wormhole, for example, is nerfed and is nowhere near as needed, and falls into the same category again that you need to be an engineer to use it. They do make a lot of profession equipment, though. They do make a lot of profession equipment. That is the only justification for maybe putting it up to B, you know. I think that might be the only justification for putting it up to B. That they make a lot of profession equipment. And that, you know, that was the argument I made for blacksmithing. That blacksmiths make a lot of I think purely because of the profession equipment, it gets a +1 bump, I reckon. +1 bump, I reckon, because of this. I reckon it's got to go but slightly behind enchanting, just because of the profession equipment. Braces, they're going to need to fix the braces, otherwise nobody will be able to use them. Braces are discovered by crafting goggles. Which is really going to limit the amount of people that will even be able to unlock the patterns for braces. Meaning that maybe if you do, you're on for a win, but braces at the moment might end up being a bit of a meme. Okay, yeah, it gets low B status. Low B status. Oh, there we go. Fishing, let's move on. Fishing. Has much changed with fishing? There is some new interesting thing. Now, see, fishing has potential. Fishing has a lot of potential, and it's not really for the reasons that most people, I think, understand. Because most people won't have realised it yet. But fishing has a lot of potential because it's the pay-to-win way of levelling the Tuskar reputation. S tier? Well, let's not go that crazy. But fishing weirdly could be very lucrative because of its ability to, you know, because you can turn in, what I'm getting at here is you can turn in fish for reputation with the Tuskars. Which in and of itself means that you might not find it too difficult to sell a lot of fish. Now, if we are looking at it from a gold making perspective, you could stand there fishing and probably make a lot of gold if you then go off to sell the fish. Not to mention fishing is very heavily embedded with cooking this time again. Tuskars have some interesting recipes as well. They do. Plus that there's also a couple of new types of fishing that unlocks with the Tuskars, which will only emphasized the goal-making potential of fishing even more so. Surprisingly, probably for the first expansion ever, I think fishing gets high B tier. I think fishing's high B. It's got to be A. It's got to be A tier. It's got to be. I don't think it quite, because it's still a secondary profession, and it's still hella boring. But I do feel that fishing has a lot of potential to make gold. You've got the nets. That's a good point. You've got the fishing. See, this is different. It's difficult, right? Because it ties in very heavily with one of the major major factions. It ties in so heavily with one of the major factions. It almost gets a bump because of that. But it has the prerequisite, the difficulty factor, of that you have to unlock the modes with the Tuskars in the first place. But then, is it going to be more or less valuable to you than enchanting? It's definitely better than engineering. Oh, I don't know, you know, I want to put it here. I want to put it as an A tier profession, and this kills me to say it, but considering but I know I'm biased. I'm biased because I don't like gathering. But I also know that those that do go out and do fishing will probably make a lot of gold off selling fish. And on the perspective of it being a tier list for gold making, I think, isn't enchanting a region-wide seller too? It is, but so's the fish. So's the fish. What do you mean with a lot of gold? Are we talking millions? Well, we don't necessarily need to quantify because we're doing this in a relative fashion. I feel that you should be able to make more gold. It's difficult because they're different professions, obviously. One's a gathering and one's a crafting one. But just purely by the fact that fish will consistently sell because you can turn fish in for reputation. Reputation with the Tuskars, and the Tuskars hold a lot of interesting both gameplay elements. There's the ice fishing, there's the lava fishing, there's the nets, there's the spear fishing. There's a bunch of new things for people to do, which means I reckon fishing could be very good. I think that's going to be a little bit more of a controversial one, but you know, if you get access to the beta, go and have a look. But I tend to feel that for something with such an ease of access, it's got some good opportunity for gold making, I reckon. Herbalism then. Herbalism. Let's continue the trend of gathering professions then. Herbalism. Ooh. Now, herbalism, in many cases, at the beginning of an expansion, is an S tier, like insta play. Insta S tier. But let's not forget, at the start of an expansion, that's because it's usually Dark Moon cards that props them up. Dark Moon cards is not going to prop up herbalism this time round. Usually, the first couple of weeks of an expansion, herbs sell faster than you can physically farm them up, and that's because scribes are milling them and turning them into inks and making Dark Moon cards like absolute morons. That's not going to happen in Dragonflight because you don't use a single herb with any Dark Moon card. Does this mean that herbalism is going to take a knock? Because the only thing that herbalism is really going to be used for is going into the potions. Now, we did say that alchemy is right up here, which means that herbalism has got to be somewhere close, right? Because if you're not making gold by selling the potions, you're making gold by farming the materials to sell it to the alchemists to then sell the potions. But it is definitely better than fishing. So I'm going to go as far as to say that herbalism probably sneaks... It's an A-tier profession. It sneaks in this way. Region-wide auction house is going to have some play in this. Could be positively, could be negatively. We don't... until it happens, we don't really know, but I reckon it's got to sneak in. It's clearly better than, it's clearly going to be better than fishing, but I don't think it's better than alchemy in and of itself, because for alchemy to make a lot of gold, it has to be able to buy a lot of herbs to make a lot of gold. So I think this makes a lot of sense to me. It's easy as all hell, though. That the difficulty of making gold with alchemy is far greater. You're going to have to really, A, get lucky with your discovery for alchemy to get the right potions, which is going to be challenge number 1. You are going to be wanting to press a button on your alchemist the second it comes off cooldown, from the very minute the game goes live. Because I should also point out, for maybe anybody that doesn't know, the discovery system for alchemy has the chance to go wrong. It has the chance to backfire, kind of like engineering does. It has the chance to backfire, and if it backfires, it puts you on cooldown before you can do it again. So, yeah. You're going to be wanting to press that button with alchemy, like, the second it comes off cooldown to get access to as many potions as possible, I reckon. But herbalism is clearly going to be sneaking just behind it, I reckon. Should we do mining next? Should we do mining, considering its equivalent gathering? Mining, I think, has different opportunities. Different opportunities, but are they better or worse than herbalism? We've put blacksmithing as S tier. Now, blacksmithing is going to probably be a very, very heavy usage of mining, right? It uses ore, like ridiculous amounts of it. Tyrivite ore, haha, it's not called Tyrivite ore anymore, is it? What's it called now? Where's blacksmithing? Where's my blacksmithing page? Blacksmithing is going to be a heavy consumer of ceravite ore. There we go. Ceravite ore and draconium ore. So yeah, for blacksmiths to do what blacksmiths are going to do, it needs miners to do what miners are going to do. It clearly does. Let's also not forget that blacksmithing is not the only profession that relies on mining. It is also a heavy component for jewel crafters, for prospecting, to get gems. Now, we've not spoke about jewel crafting yet. Maybe we should have looked at jewel crafting first, but I think mining has got more potential than even alchemy. Simply for the fact that blacksmiths are going to need a lot of ore to do what they need to do. Draconium is likely to be rare. From my testing of mining on the beta, finding draconium nodes in the first place is a pain in the ass. Even when you find them, getting the ore at higher qualities is also a pain in the ass. I tend to feel that that's got to put mining right up the top there for gold making. If you're flying about, and this means, like, if you're flying around on your herba miner, you're going to cash in real quick. Engineering is also using mining. True. You got 3 big professions pulling from all of the ore in the at the start of an expansion. I think mining's got to sit up here. I think you've got more potential. I think it's probably likely to make more people more gold than alchemists will make, simply for the reason that alchemy has quite a steep barrier to entry. You've got to get the right pattern through the discovery system, which is not going to be pleasant to work with. But then if you do get the right pattern and you offer... the potential is really high here. Your potential with mining is kind of capped. But, if you do it for an hour a day or you do it for 10 hours a day, it kind of is far more repetitive than that of alchemy. It's got to be higher than alchemy. You'll understand why it's higher than alchemy when we talk about jewel crafting. Yeah. I think it's probably one of the best professions. Should we do Inscription then? Because that sort of balances out the need for herbs, and because alchemy is going to pull from herbs, Inscription's going to pull from herbs. Now, this is a difficult one. This is a difficult one. In the first week, there's the potential for stupid money if Dark Moon cards pop off. We got to consider what Dark Moon cards might do for the profitability of this profession. For the purposes of making gold, I've looked into Dark Moon cards in a lot of detail. Dark Moon cards, they've bumped the base item level of the trinket as well, actually. The basic trinkets are now higher than they once were. Where's my scribe? Base trinkets are 372, I feel. They were implemented into the game at 350, and people didn't care about them at 350, quite rightly. Where's Inscription? Dark Moon decks. So the base Dark Moon deck is item level 372. That's going to mean even your basic Bind on Equip Dark Moon deck is going to be relatively well sought after. For reference, 372 puts it at like Heroic Dungeon Gear. It's pre-raid bis easy. But then obviously you can convert it into the Dark Moon deck box. This is a new thing for Dragonflight, something new for Dark Moon decks. Which is the end game item that you're then going to be able to infuse it, and you're going to be able to get your Dark Moon deck trinket all the way up to item level 418 potentially. Now, with the power that these are going to have on them, I think there's going to be a lot of people that will be interested in these. Now, this is just one man's opinion. This is one man's opinion that doesn't particularly engage in much end game activity. But if history repeats itself in any way, shape or form, that instantly makes Inscription like ridiculous for the start. But it's very heavily weighted on whether it's if Dark Moon cards pop off or not. What does Inscription have apart from Dark Moon? Let's look at it from the perspective. It's Dark Moon. Oh, I'm really tempted to put Inscription as S tier. It's going S tier. It's not Blacksmithing level S tier, but it's definitely S. It's S tier very simply because even if the Sims don't suggest that Dark Moon cards are like best in slot, it's a Dark Moon card. We have not had an expansion launch forever where Dark Moon cards have not done ridiculous things at the beginning. I can't see there being enough of just the Sims saying that they don't sim quite as high. I can't see as being any reason why Dark Moon cards wouldn't explode to begin with. But what does Inscription have outside of Dark Moon cards? You've got missives are playing a big part again. And they've tweaked the way that missives work, but missives are still going to be a thing. Loads of gold will be made off missives. You've got the potential of even just crafting and selling inks to other scribes that have chosen to spec in one other direction. I'm just wondering how much weight am I putting on these Dark Moon decks? Oh! Scribes also sell other crafters knowledge points. This puts it up. Yeah, it's definitely S tier. It's definitely S tier. It's definitely S tier. Inscription has the ability to sell other profession knowledge points, which is just bonkers. There is a cooldown on it, and it's only 1 point, but it means every single crafter for every single profession in the game is going to want one of these. Scribes are not going to have any difficulties whatsoever selling these treaties to other characters.
Are you just glad to see me?
Absolutely.
Both, I hope.
It's almost time. Laughing face, see I am a bit too late to come in.
Hey, don't worry. This will end up on YouTube. You're all good. Yeah, Inscription is definitely S tier. I don't think that it's got quite as long a life to it as Blacksmithing, so I don't think it's going to be better than Blacksmithing. I still think the fact that blacksmiths make weapons primarily backed up by a solid showcase of plate gear and the majority of Profession's tools. I still think Blacksmithing is going to outshine Inscription from a goal-making perspective, but selling knowledge points to other professions and obviously Dark Moon cards, it's just an insta-win, I reckon. Insta-win. It's going to be expensive as all hell, but on the flip side, I reckon you should make a lot of gold by doing that at the same time. Yeah. And the dragon riding stuff, that's also a very good point. All of the dragon riding stuff, dragon riding, all of the cosmetic, or a lot of cosmetics for dragon riding. I forget to put weight on cosmetic items, but yeah, it has access to a hell of a lot of cosmetics for the dragon riding. In somewhat replacing glyphs, which is a bit sad that Inscription doesn't make glyphs, but these are going to be presumably steady sellers for you as well. They'll come through work orders once again, but either way, they'll be reasonably valuable enough and you'll be able to consistently sell these, I reckon. Yeah, Inscription's S tier. Inscription's definitely S tier. There's no doubt about it. Should we talk jewel crafting then? Jewel crafting. What do we think jewel crafting is going to do? Jewel crafting's in a bit of a funny position. Jewel crafting is my main profession, so I should know it inside out. The difficulty I have is this is very, very heavily reliant, super heavily reliant on people actually wanting gems. This is the thing, right? If all of a sudden people decide that they don't really care so much about gems, jewel crafting's in a bit of a sticky spot. But because it has the complexity of prospecting, the complexity that is added by prospecting instantly makes it a good profession for gold making, even if the end things that you craft aren't super in demand. This is why I've been a jewel crafter for like 10 years on my main character, because every expansion, it's a super consistent gold maker. Early days, rings and necklaces. Rings and necklaces. You're selling, you have any class that has the ability to sell a power upgrade to any character, it's a winning class. It's a winning profession. Any tailors out there will understand what I mean from the perspective of capes, right? You're not selling just to a select few people that happen to wear that armor class. You're crafting rings and necklaces for everybody. It's got to be A tier. The question is does jewel crafting sit, where does it sit in this hierarchy? Where does it sit in the hierarchy? I think it goes... Ooh, it's hard. It's a hard one, you know. I've got to think about where it goes relative to maybe some of the other things that are coming up. Because jewel crafting has got gems. Prospecting... Nobody understands prospecting rates properly. The number one question you get about jewel crafting is how does prospecting work? Meaning that those that do understand the maths can make stinking amounts of gold from it because they know when to buy and when not to, more importantly, when not to buy ore. Do we reckon it's better than mining? Do we reckon you're going to make more gold from jewel crafting than you could with mining? I think miners are still going to take the lion's share of the profits because they'll also be selling. You as a jewel crafter are going to be competing with blacksmiths and you're going to be competing with engineers for your materials. I do think jewel crafting, because you're making rings and necklaces for everybody, power gaining items, it's got to be better than alchemy, but I don't think it's better than mining. Not in the first months or so. Yeah, I tend to agree, I think it sneaks in here, you know. I think it sneaks in between alchemy and mining. Alchemy is, you know, is going to be a tough one, but it has potential, whereas mining is simple and practically guaranteed. And miners are going to have to sell their, you know, miners are going to be able to choose where they sell. They're going to have many, many customers, right? They're going to be selling their wares to blacksmiths, to jewel crafters, and to engineers, which means that your material costs are gonna be high. It's gonna be good, but it's not gonna be super mega crazy. And the only reason it's not higher than this is because I don't really believe that gems are gonna be a massive thing. They're clearly not powerful enough. They're clearly too convoluted. There's like 20 different gem cuts with different combinations of stuff. That means that you're taking quite a risk crafting some of everything, because not everything is going to sell very well. Yeah, I think that makes sense for jewel crafting. It's an A tier one for sure, but I still think you'll find it far easier and probably end up making more gold with mining. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Let's get skinning out the way. Because it's the last gathering one. And it means that we can then talk about leatherworking in a little bit more sensible fashion. Skinning's an interesting one this time round, because I don't feel that from the perspective of gold making, skinning's going to be that good. I'm not convinced with skinning. Let's look at who uses the skin. The leather and the scales that you get is going to be entirely funneled through to one profession for the most part. Leatherworkers. Now, we haven't spoke about leatherworking, but I do think that leatherworking is going to be... I'll give you a sneak peek with leatherworking. Leatherworking is going to be very good. Skinning, though, because some of the changes that we've seen in Shadowlands to group skinning, the only saving grace for skinning could be if the rare materials are rare. Because let's not forget, heavy callous hide was a thing, right? Heavy callous hide was a thing. You'd only get a couple of them an hour, and they were in heavy demand. But they were in heavy demand in Shadowlands because of legendaries. We don't strictly have that level of demand in Dragonflight. I'm going to go as far as I think skinning is a B. I think skinning's a B. Now, I might eat my hat on this one. I might end up being proven wrong, but I don't think skinning's got that much potential. The only thing that could, like I said, be a bit of a saving grace is if leatherworking ends up being monstrous. All the Drakthir running around wanting the gear. See, this is the only saving grace, I think, that if leatherworking, it'll get pulled further up the list because of leatherworking. It's probably got to be a A tier one. It's got to be equivalent to the other gathering, but I don't think it's that high. I think this makes sense. Is skinning going to make more than fishing? Probably. It's going to make more gold than fishing. It's going to make more gold than fishing because of Drakthir. 3 male classes, 4 leather classes. True. But group skinning. Look what group skinning did to leather in Shadow at the end of Shadowlands. You get a couple of 2x4 skinning farms on the go, and you are just flooded with materials. I think it's got to fit there. I think it's the worst of the gathering professions. It's the worst of the gathering professions, I reckon. By that I mean it's not as good as herbalism or mining. It requires you to have a relatively well-geared character-ish to be effective with it. Group skinning is going to mean that it's going to push the prices down very aggressively. And even the demand of leatherworking, I don't think is going to overpower just how much skin will be produced in the early days. Leather and scales, rare leather and scales. The baiting is being yet to be tested in much detail. So this is probably the one I have the least confidence with. It's still an A-tier profession. Let's not get it wrong. It's still going to be pretty good for gold making. But I do think there are better options. the normal leather is going to end up being worthless as the insane amount of the common one. Well, I'm hoping there'll be some... I've not looked into details on this, but I am hoping that there'll be some exit strategy for the basic leather and scale. Just like we have today where, you know, desolate leather can be converted into something and vended. It clears it out the system. Otherwise, it will just pile up and pile up and pile up, kind of like Callous Hide did. But yeah, I think it will be good, but it won't be better than these. This is kind of the point here. We got to rank the... It's a hierarchy, right? I think it'll stand its ground. You'll make a bunch of gold if you go out there skinning, but you probably won't make as much gold as by engaging in some of these other professions. I think that's fair. Should we do leatherworking then? Because leatherworking ties in nicely to skinning. Leatherworking having Drakthir. Now I know I'm also biased, but leatherworking is super powerful for one simple reason. It's basically like having two professions. Now, it's powerful because of that in the first place, that you're creating leather gear and you're making mail gear. But Drakthirs are a thing, right? The demand for mail gear is going to go through the roof. Everybody has a hunter to begin with. Shamans exist, but Drakthirs, man, mail armor is going to be in super high demand, and those Drakthirs are going to have to pay a premium if they want their best gear, and they want it before the rest of the 10 million other Drakthir. There is no doubt in my mind that leatherworking is S tier. The question becomes, is it going to be more or less profitable than mining an inscription? Is it going to... Where is it going to sit in this tree? Inscription is going to do silly things with Dark Moon cards. But once Dark Moon cards gets saturated, leatherworking will come into play. See, it's interesting. At the very early days, it's here. But it only gets better and it only gets stronger the longer you spend playing with leatherworking. The more knowledge points you get with leatherworking, it could easily be here. Could easily end up top of the tree for gold making potential. But in the first couple of weeks, it's here. So do we stick it in the middle just because it's kind of a bit of a... Leatherworking also makes armor kits as well, you know. Leatherworking's making commodities as well that are big. Ah, it's going here. It's going here. Inscription is a one-hit wonder, right? Inscription's a one-hit wonder. Dark Moon cards, you're going to do silly things with Dark Moon cards, but it won't last forever. But the fact it's still a thing means that it's a... Yeah, it's here. It's here. You're making all of the equipment for all of the new Drakthir. You also have a few consumables, armor kits, drums. Yeah. Is it better than blacksmithing? Is the fact that you're making everything for Drakthir, does that inherently make it better than blacksmithing? Blacksmith makes weapons. Blacksmiths make profession tools for everybody. Oh, it's tough. In the long run, yeah. In the long run, I do think it's here. Just because your options, it's like having two professions to begin with. Leatherworking has the offhand caster weapons too. I think it does, yeah. Should we just double check leatherworking real quick? We'll double check leatherworking. Where's my leatherworker? Leather cow, I presume, is my leatherworker. Let's just do a quick sanity check. I'm in two minds whether it gets top of the tree or not. Let's take a little bit of a look at everything that... So you've got all of the leather gear. It's just had... Okay, we won't talk about that just yet. It makes all the leather gear. It makes all of the endgame mail gear. Oh, it makes a lot of profession equipment as well. It's the profession accessories, not the tools. There's the crossbow. I think there's... Oh, there's just a lot of cool items of gear that it makes. The reagents itself, there's enough intermediates, but blacksmithing also deals heavily in intermediates, so that's sort of, you know, +1, -1. Armor kits and drums as well. I'm trying to not be biased here, but I do think leatherworking is top of the tree. I think leatherworking has got to be top of the tree so far. It's got to be top of the tree. It makes lots of profession gear. It makes everything that all of these new Drakthir are going to want. It also supplies all of the leather wearers in the entire game. It's backed up with armor kits and drums. It's got commodities in there. It's got everything. It's got a bit of everything. It's going to be a profession that will, you know, consistently keep up with what's going on though. Blacksmithing is very heavily focused on the weapons. Blacksmith's advantage is weapons, and it makes the profession tools. But leatherworking's got a little bit of everything, and it's going to be able to allow you to specialize in any one of those directions and do well. Which I think has the potential to make you more gold with leatherworking, I reckon. Blacksmithing will be best in the first patch. Leatherworking will... Well, you see, this is it, right? That's what I didn't specify at the beginning. I just went purely by the theory of the professions are going to be ranked based on their ability to make gold. I didn't strictly say when they're going to make gold. But I think leatherworking is going to be more consistent. And that sort of makes sense with this, right? Dark Moon cards, one-hit wonder. Make a gold cap. Blacksmithing then goes on to make everybody's weapons and everybody's profession tools. But then long-term leatherworking has the most potential, I reckon, simply because there's so many classes that their gear comes from leatherworking. Yeah, I'm going with that. That means we have only one to speak of. We have tailoring. Where does tailoring fit into the mix with all of this? Tailoring, unfortunately, has a issue in that it doesn't rely on any form of natural gathering. B for bags. Tailoring, sure, it makes cloth gear for cloth wearers. There's bags. It's always got bags. The bags are they're not any more special than what they ever have been. There's no quality on bags. Your materials themselves don't strictly have quality to it. Tailoring, I think, is a B. I think tailoring's a B. It doesn't do anything special. It would normally be higher. Tailoring would normally be higher, but everything else is excelling in what it has to offer. Tailoring's not really changed. Tailoring, if we let's take a quick look at tailoring. Tailoring's not really changed much. Everybody gathers cloth, which instantly makes cloth one of the more cheaper materials, generally speaking. Meaning that the cloth gear in it of itself ends up being cheaper. You have cooldowns on your materials. Ooh. You make cloth gear. Yeah, it doesn't excel anywhere. It makes a few bits of profession gear. Spell threads, bags. It's got a few utility things, but nothing super special. Yeah, it's a difficult one, tailoring. The question for me becomes, is you going to make more gold from enchanting, or are you going to make more gold from tailoring? Is it going to be more from enchanting, or is it going to be more from tailoring? And the fact that I can't easily work out if you'd make more gold from enchanting, I think purely the fact that it makes gear, which enchanting doesn't. Any profession that makes a serious piece of power upgradable gear, I think it's either high B or low A. High B or low A. It's a tricky one. I don't think that tailoring does enough new to outpace these in terms of gold making. You can fish and you can sell fish all day. Anybody trying to level up the Tuskars fast are going to buy as many fish as you can get your hands on them. Skinning is going to provide all of the materials for leatherworking, so it's clearly going to make more. Yeah, I think it's high B. I think that's it. I think that's my tier list for Dragonflight professions. I think that there's some logic that's gone into that I hope you lot agree with. I guess I should at this point, considering that we're going to probably put this on YouTube, suggest that people leave their comments in the leave your comments down below. Hit the like button whether you agree or disagree, and subscribe if you're new around here. I've been Manthieus, so I'll see you all next time. Peace.